on, and I love the fact that the corruption is being exposed by the transparency forced upon the Democrats, because we find out Adam Schiff, and we had indications of this because the House members, the Republicans, came out and said he was doing this, but now we have the transcripts showing that Adam Schiff was shutting down any inquiry into, for instance, what Colonel Vindeman was doing in the White House in terms of who he was communicating with about this issue. Why? Because he didn't want the whistleblower quote to be disclosed. Well, Schiff is compromised and conflicted on that issue because the allegation is, and it's been confirmed now by Schiff's office, this leaker communicated with Schiff's office. Schiff was briefed on it. He knew what was going on. He lied about the fact that they had communications with this leaker. And there's a significant issue about whether the leaker communicated classified information improperly to Schiff. And now Schiff is trying to prevent anyone from asking questions that could get to the heart of the scandal. He's conflicted. He should not be running the impeachment committee. It's really the Intelligence Committee. He's conflicted in more ways than you can count. Of course, that hasn't stopped others. I mean, this is just par for the course when it comes to targeting President Trump. You've got corrupt public officials, appointed officials, trying to point a finger at President Trump. Mueller was conflicted. Schiff is conflicted. Obama, who was running the whole operation from the White House, he wanted Hillary in. He was conflicted. But we're not allowed to talk about that, are we? But I'm going to talk about it, and Judicial Watch is going to keep on investigating it. And one of the really dishonest aspects of this discussion, and it shows you the kind of the unbelievable hypocrisy and corruption here, is the continued media collusion with the establishment, deep state, you name it, to try to keep the name of this whistleblower confidential. First of all, legally, he's not a whistleblower. I call him a leaker. He's not a whistleblower. The legal authorities in charge of analyzing his complaint have concluded the whistleblower law doesn't cover him. And even if it did, his identity is not protected necessarily under the law. At best, there's a limited protection on his identity required of the government officials who are handling his complaint directly. It doesn't cover me. It doesn't cover you. It doesn't cover Congress. It doesn't cover the President of the United States. It doesn't cover other agencies, officials in the administration. And it certainly doesn't cover the media. I want you to compare and contrast the protection racket going around this so-called whistleblower with what happened to Linda Tripp. Remember Linda Tripp? She recorded those conversations with Monica Lewinsky demonstrating crimes by the President of the United States at the time, Bill Clinton. She was excoriated, destroyed, made fun of personally and physically, prosecuted, harassed by the media, by the Democratic establishment. That's what they really think of whistleblowers. I've worked with whistleblowers. I know whistleblowers. Whistleblowers have been friends of mine. Ladies and gentlemen, this is no whistleblower. Oh, and before I get to the specifics of this individual, so the lawyer who was representing the whistleblower, or leaker as I call him, someone, again, you would think now I tell you what, if Judicial Watch was representing, well, let me step a bit further back. So Mark Zaid, the lawyer, represents the leaker. He had a series of tweets in the beginning of the Trump administration talking about the coup. The coup had started promoting, quote, rebellion, hashtag rebellion, resistance, and talking about throwing the president out of office, which is, I guess I don't know if it's his constitutional right to advocate a rebellion and a coup, but it certainly shows where his head is at when it comes to his approach to the Trump administration. And he's the lawyer for this guy. Now, again, these are tweets he made, publicly available documents. Why is it took 8 weeks to figure out what this man had tweeted? I tell you what, if Judicial Watch represented someone in a similar situation and I had tweets like that, do you think it would take the media 8 weeks to figure out what tweets I had made that would be controversial in that regard? And I got a lot of tweets. If you follow me on Twitter, you know I have a lot of tweets. So they're protecting him. And of course, I don't know who the name is. There's this supposition based on circumstantial evidence, strong circumstantial evidence, that the person's name is. Now, I don't know he is the whistleblower, but he was a CIA official who was detailed to the White House, the Obama White House, and he left in 2017, so he was still working in the Trump White House. After allegedly, after he was outed more or less as an anti-Trumper in the Trump White House, and I don't say that because I know it to be true. I do say that based on reports. So, to be fair, we don't know what he did at the White House. We don't know that he is the leaker. But it's interesting because he fits many of the, as I said, there's strong circumstantial evidence he is. So given the prominence of his name, we did an investigation, and we are conducting an investigation. We're asking questions under FOIA about his activities, and we looked at the public record, including the White House office visiting, the White House visitor logs of the Obama White House. And the Obama White House, long story short, kept visitor logs of some of the people, or many of the people, who visited the Obama White House. And typically the logs show, they are not perfect by any means, they show who you're visiting. I don't think they show the topic of the meeting and the date and time you enter and leave the White House, or at least you're supposed to show that. So what Judicial Watch did was we went and looked at all the information. And I was going to print out like a portion of the logs, but even the first portion that we would print out would have had 10,000 pages. And so these are what the logs look like. You know, this is alphabetical, so it's just data. And they're imperfect, obviously. So we have uncovered the details of the meetings at the White House. Again, public document, available if you know where to look. And this name's been out there for a long time, so it's not like we're the only ones who have it. And it's interesting, the media isn't terribly interested in figuring out who the leaker is. And the details are interesting because they show that he was meeting with some folks that I think other people are going to have questions about. The logs reveal that he met with the following individuals when he was detailed to the Obama White House. Daria Kaluniak, who is co-founder and executive director of the Soros-funded Anti-Corruption Action Center in Ukraine. She visited in the White House according to the logs, on December 9th, 2015. Now, The Hill reported that in April of 2016, during the U.S. presidential race, I think John Solomon wrote this story, the U.S. embassy under Obama in Kiev took the rare step of trying to press the Ukrainian government to back off its investigation of both the U.S. aid and this Anti-Corruption Action Center. Again, very Soros-connected. So you have the Soros-connected person meeting with this controversial figure. Gina Lentin, now Senior Program Officer at Freedom House, she was formerly Eurasia Program Coordinator at the Open Society Foundations, which is all Soros. I mean, that's Soros's group. She visited on March 16th, 2016. And isn't that interesting? A month later, the embassy was telling the Ukrainians to back off on investigating Soros. Rachel Goldbrenner, now an NYU law professor, she was at the time an advisor to the then ambassador to the United Nations, Samantha Power. Remember the unmaskings? She visited in January and August of 2016, Mr. Ciaramella. Orly Keener, a foreign affairs officer at the State Department who is a Russia specialist. She's the wife of a top official at the State Department, legal advisor James Blair. She visited in March and June of 2016, June of 2015. And interestingly, Nazar Kolodnitsky, the lead anti-corruption prosecutor in Ukraine. He visited on January 19th, 2016. So, also joining him, visiting him, Michael Kimmage, who was with the State Department's policy planning staff, specialized in Russia and Ukraine issues. He visited in October 26, 2015. James Melville, who was then Obama's ambassador to Estonia, he visited in September 9, 2015. Melville is a never-Trumper. He resigned in protest of Trump, so we know that's like what that's about. Victoria Nuland, who was at the time the Assistant Secretary of State for European and Eurasian Affairs, met with on June 17, 2016. So this June period of 2016 is a very interesting period because that's back when all of this spying was going on, being ginned up to target then candidate Trump. Now, Nuland was a key figure there because Judicial Watch, not Congress, not the media, Judicial Watch uncovered that Victoria Nuland, who was the top person for Kerry at the Obama State Department on Russia, was behind pushing out the Clinton-funded dossier, was also involved in vacuuming up classified information to shovel to people in the House of Representatives and in the Senate to undermine President Trump, and they were sending in the Democrats, a few never-Trump Republicans. Also, Artem Sitnik, who's the Ukrainian Anti-Corruption Bureau Director, visited on January 19, 2016. And Sitnik is the one who confirmed, according to the Daily Wire, that the Ukrainians were helping the Clinton campaign. Well, isn't that interesting? So what does this all show? It shows that he was involved in Ukraine. And he was involved with some of the figures and organizations who were anti-Trump, opposing Trump's policies in Ukraine, and may have been behind the involvement of Ukraine, as I say, in the effort to destroy Trump. Because you have to remember, not only, as I said earlier, was Ukraine a kind of a key focal point of the Mueller gang's attack on President Trump, but Ukraine itself was proactively trying to take out Trump. A Ukrainian government official leaked this information called the Black Ledger, which detailed Manafort's financial relationships with his Ukrainian clients. They allegedly were working with, and I have details on this, I want to be sure I have her name, Alexandra Shalupa, a contractor hired by the DNC during the 2016 election, who allegedly coordinated with the Ukrainians to investigate Trump. And so then a Ukrainian official actually wrote an op-ed attacking Trump. So Ukraine was directly, they talk about the Russians, the Ukrainians were attacking Trump. Talk about intervention in our political campaigns. That's what you have to understand from the president's perspective when he goes and asks the president of Ukraine to investigate what the heck went on there. And it is no surprise that the deep staters running Ukraine policy objected to that. They object to Rudy Giuliani coming in and asking questions they didn't want to answer. They object to the president directing them to talk to people who didn't have a political or a kind of institutional interest in doing the same old on foreign policy. Because the same old on foreign policy saw the worst political corruption scandal occur in American history, which was the Obama administration working with Ukraine, Russia, Italy, the United Kingdom, Australia, perhaps Germany, who knows how many other countries, to target President Trump, then candidate Trump, and it was continued into the Trump administration. And the president's going to get impeached for asking Ukraine what was going on there? I don't think so. Or I would hope not. So, hey, media, look at the logs, ask some questions about what the Obama White House's involvement in Ukraine was. I don't know if is the leaker, but certainly his involvement in Ukraine at the White House of Barack Obama means that we should be asking more questions about the Barack Obama's involvement in Ukraine, Barack Obama's White House involvement. Let me start over on this. Involvement in Ukraine means that we should be asking more questions about what the guys he was working for were doing in Ukraine, namely the Obama White House. This is why they don't want to talk about it. Not because necessarily he's the leaker. And if he is the leaker, there's all sorts of other problems. Because he was an Obama White House guy, he worked for Biden, was friendly with Biden, it looks like. It shows a political animus against President Trump, and they don't want that to come up. They want to pretend all of the criticism by the deep state bureaucrats are all neutral. These guys don't have an agenda. They don't have an axe to grind. And as the leaker, that kind of blows out. Well, we all know that's not true, but it's certainly impossible to make the case if this gentleman's the leaker. But irrespective of whether he's the leaker, these issues need to be investigated. And as I say, we have the documents that Judicial Watch examined that are public that no one else wanted to examine because they would raise the uncomfortable questions I'm raising. Now, the DNC contractor who allegedly worked with Ukraine to investigate Trump visited the Obama White House 27 times. Oh, wow. Isn't that interesting? Let's see who she visited. Now, a lot of the meetings when you visit the White House, you get invited to parties and you show up and you're one of 100 or 50 people, 100 or 200 people. It's you're not necessarily conducting any nefarious business or any business of any substance. But there were a number of visits that raised additional questions. She visited Charles Kupchan from 2014 to 17. Kupchan served as Special Assistant to the President and Senior Director for European Affairs on the staff of the National Security Council. That meeting was in November of 2015. When did Trump begin running for president? Just asking. Alexandra Sopko, who was at the time a Special Assistant and Policy Advisor to the Director of Office of Intergovernmental Affairs, which was run by Valerie Jarrett. Valerie Jarrett. Also listed at that meeting is Alexa Kissinger, who was a Special Assistant to Jarrett. That was in June of 2015. And someone she worked with often was Asher Mayerson, who was at the time a Policy Advisor to the Office of Public Engagement under Jarrett. And she had 5 visits with Asher, I'm assuming I don't know if that's a male or female name. Meyerson had 5 visits with Chalupa, including December 2015, January 2016, February 2016, May 2016, and June 2016. Meyerson had previously been an intern at the Center for American Progress. And as I look at this, my guess is Meyerson wasn't the visitee. It was the person who signed her in, and the visitee was someone more senior. But I don't know that, but based on my experience of examining Obama White House visitor logs, that's what I suspect. So this is what Judicial Watch has found as a result of basic heavy lifting that the media refuses to do because they want President Trump to be overthrown. And this concern about the leaker's secrecy is absurd, because the leaker is alleged to have potentially misused classified information, improperly communicated it, and may have been involved in misconduct in talking to the White House friends he had about this meeting or the phone call the president had with the president of Ukraine. And so we're supposed to keep that person's name secret. And why is that? The law doesn't require it. In fact, the public interest demands that the leaker who instigated something that rarely happens in American history, an impeachment of the President of the United States, we're supposed to keep that name secret? And why? Because he might be targeted with negative reaction from the public, and no one wants anyone to be threatened. No one wants anyone to be harmed. No one wants anyone to be unnecessarily attacked. But if that's the logic, why are there any public testimony or testimonies? Why are any of the individuals who are testifying, why are any of them being made public? They want to take out a president based on secret testimony and secret allegations by someone we don't know. I mean, look how bad it is. The media is so dishonest, the anti-Trump media, and it is anti-Trump media. It is the, you know, I've been in Washington, I don't know, 1986, 30 plus years. Believe it or not, 30 years. I've been working at Judicial Watch for 21 years, and I've never seen the legacy media so corrupted. The veil has been lifted. They are no longer even pretending to be journalists. They are media. The media main entities are liberal advocacy groups that sometimes engage in journalism. On issues of government corruption, Judicial Watch produces more substantial journalism than many of these legacy media organizations. And they are doing their darndest to protect government officials who they think are doing something they like politically, that they would never provide cover for anyone else over. And you see that with the publication of this new book, but written by Anonymous. And you see the media uncritically reporting a book written by someone who they don't know and have no way of verifying the information this person has about President Trump or anything going on in the administration. Completely throwing out all standards of journalism out the window. Why? Because they want to take out President Trump. So what's to be done next? We have to stop the coup. We have to stop it. And it can't be, oh, well, we'll have a Senate trial and then that will be the end of it. I think that's not the right way to go. I think the Senate needs to build a firewall to protect the Constitution, protect the presidency, protect you, the American people, and your rights and liberties by denouncing and disavowing this coup process that's going on in the House and saying, I don't care, guys, what you come up with, but that's no way to run a railroad, and we're not participating in your abuse of power. We will not be having a trial. And they need 51 votes in the Senate to take that stand. I don't know if they have the 51 votes, but they will never have those votes if there's no leadership on it. And I'd like to think Judicial Watch is providing some leadership on it. Call your senators. Let them know what you think. 202-224-3121. And, of course, call your House members. Whether they're Democrat or Republican, call them and let them know what your views are about this coup process. They are making up allegations against the president. They're abusing his rights, abusing the Constitution, stepping all over your interests as citizens and voters to obstruct justice. You hear me? Obstruct justice because they don't want criminal prosecutions of anyone for the Spygate abuses of President Trump or anyone else, and gain some political benefit in the next election, which is less than a year from now. Think of the absurdity of initiating an impeachment investigation that is so purely partisan, less than a year out from an election. But they're going to power through unless they hear objections from the voters. And as I said earlier, they are backing off a little bit based on strong pushback from citizens and some elected officials. But that pushback has got to be stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. You can't let up. And Judicial Watch, as I said, we've got dozens of lawsuits. We've got 3 lawsuits on the Biden corruption scandal, which is not going away. Our friend John Solomon has just uncovered under one of the few journalists who do aggressive Freedom of Information Act, work that the established media doesn't like. He got documents out of the State Department showing that the Obama administration knew full well about the corruption of Burisma. They were warned, they were worried about it at the State Department, and then when they were asked about it, the State Department said, go ask Joe Biden's office. Of course, the media knows all that because they were reporting on it at the time it was happening. Now we have internal confirmation. One of the witnesses, I think it's Mr. Kent, he confirmed this was going on. He said, I told them Burisma was bad news and we shouldn't have any support for them because, believe it or not, they were going to have USAID money, your money, during the Obama administration given to that corrupt company. And it was stopped because of George Kent. This is why I love the transparency that's been forced on the Democrats, because the truth kind of sneaks out. One of the first things you see here at Judicial Watch when you come into our offices we have quotes of the Founding Fathers on the walls of our offices that reflect on our mission of transparency, government accountability, anti-corruption. And the quote from George Washington is, the truth will come out, or I'm going on memory, I think the truth will prevail where there is great pains taken to bring it to light. The truth will prevail. Now, the problem with that is it doesn't prevail often at the time you want it to prevail, but it will prevail. And that's one of Judicial Watch's guiding motivations here. So we're facing a significant challenge to our Constitution and the Republic with the coup, and I'm encouraging you, drop whatever you're doing. Many of you probably never called your congressman before, or wrote a letter to the editor, or sent a message on Facebook, or shared something with your friends, or your church, or your colleagues. But let them know where you stand on this. You need to get active. And of course, you can support Judicial Watch. That's one way to vindicate the rule of law, because you can bet we're doing it.
Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch all the latest news from Judicial Watch.